Hey guys, my name is Armando Vera Carvajal, Program Director here at the Newchip Accelerator. I am so excited today to have a very special interview with none other than our Khara Croswaite Brindle. She is actually a member of the Newchip Accelerator. She is in our cohort. And believe it or not, she has written a book that is absolutely amazing, Perfectioneur. It actually just came out in June 2020, so this month. Perfectioneur From Workaholic to Well-Balanced, One Therapist's Guide to Get You There. I have to say that this book came at such a perfect time for me, especially working with entrepreneurs, understanding a lot of the challenges that they have to go through, and also, being an entrepreneur myself. This book has been absolutely mind-blowing for me. It's such a quick read. I want to give you a little bit of background on the book. Glorifying gold stars is overrated as a perfectioneur or a perfectionist entrepreneur. Khara was running herself into the ground chasing success. She needed someone who could look her in the eye and say that she was on the fast track to burnout and just total collapse. As a therapist, Khara has actually taught people about self-care and balance daily, yet as often is the case for people who are advising, she wasn't able to actually do that for herself. So that was a challenge. In this journey that was filled with anxiety and stubbornness and many roadblocks, she eventually decided to surround herself with lots of entrepreneurs and figured out a way to embrace a work-life balance and also find her identity as a perfectioneur. She wrote this book, from what I've gathered thus far, to help other entrepreneurs and perfectioneurs on their journeys. Diving into this, I kind of gave a little background about you, but I would love it if you could tell us a little bit more about, who exactly is Khara? Why is she doing what she is doing right now? Would love to learn a little bit more.
Yeah, I think, my biggest hat is a mental health therapist. And so that's it overshadows everything that I do and it colors everything that I do. And I think even just being part of this Newchip Accelerator program has really helped me embrace the entrepreneurial side of myself and the fact that we all wear so many hats. And so, going from mental health and focusing on mental health professionals, how to help them do the work that they do, and now going further into entrepreneurs, I think there's this nice, amazing niche of people who are struggling with work-life balance that we're all saying, oh, we got to hustle hard, we have to do this really well, and we're feeling burnt out before we even really get started. So for me, this is a tribute to my own journey over the last couple of years and just experiencing burnout and saying, how do I pivot? How do I change? And I'm just really happy this book is speaking to other people because it's my story and some great ideas, hopefully, for other people.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, it's easy to say, what inspired you to write this book, because you talk so much about From Workaholic to Well-Balanced, but your own specific experiences in the book, you talk a lot about those roadblocks and those challenges that were along this journey that you've had as an entrepreneur and as a mental health professional. What inspired you at the core to write Perfectioneur?
Part of my journey was embracing vulnerability. I think in the mental health space and in entrepreneurial space, we want to give this forward-facing confidence of we have it all figured out. Specifically the millennial generation, which I'm a part of, old millennial, as they call us. And so I got to a place where I was doing a lot of my own work through coaches and my own therapy. And then all of a sudden I just had this aha moment at 4 a.m. and said, I need to write a book about this. I need to embrace the vulnerability of telling my story to others versus just the self-help book. I wanted it to be a little bit more vulnerable, a little bit more honest, and just saying I have this great forward-facing persona, but, this took work to actually be well-balanced.
Oh, but tell us, what exactly is a perfectioneur? You can get into the weeds of it, who is a perfectioneur?
Yeah, I think that question is coming up a lot because people are on a journey to figure out if they resonate with the book, if they resonate with that identity. I feel like there are some perfectioners in the workplace, but they haven't been labeled like this before. They've been, just game changers, most likely. So if you've ever seen the movie, I think the best interpretation of Perfectioneur so far, which is an old movie, it's from 2000, but it's called Keeping the Faith. And there's a female entrepreneur in the book, in the movie, and she just embodies everything that I think I've worked on myself, but also I think that other people can relate to. And so some of those things are the fact that she loves her work. She's very passionate by her work. But then she has this moment of questioning, do I have a good work-life balance? Do I have enough time for relationships, for hobbies, for other things? And I think we all go through that, like, oh, we were told in our 20s and 30s, go ahead and hustle hard, make all these changes, do all these things. But then we blink and we're like, oh, do I have anyone to share it with? Do I have anyone to share what she calls victory energy with, which I love that term, like this high we get from like, we're doing great things. But if you have no one to share it with, what does that mean for your life? So, I think, the back of the book says workaholics, Enneagram type 3s, all these different terms for the people who just really steamroll. They just go forward and they don't really pause. They don't really take a look at their milestones. It's really just next thing, next thing. And I'm guilty of that. And I think there are a lot of entrepreneurs that can relate to that specific part.
Kind of going off on a similar vein, one thing that you talk a little bit about in your book is essentially the value of knowing thyself at the most fundamental level. And you mentioned, the Enneagram. You didn't mention Myers-Briggs, but I'm very much a follower of the whole Myers-Briggs, me being an INFP. What is the value? And from both an entrepreneurial standpoint and somebody who is in the mental health profession, what is the real value of knowing yourself, especially if you're a perfectioner?
I think the sooner we can embrace our identity for all its positives and the edges, I think the better we can show up authentically in the world. The Enneagram, I've seen in the last 10 years, really increase in popularity. And part of that is because it talks about how you relate to others, which this youngest generation is saying they're lonely and isolated and the most anxious and depressed we've ever seen. So I think they're the ones kind of pushing and seeking answers of like, how do I connect with people? How do I connect with others? So I love that you mentioned Myers-Briggs, because I think all of us have had a moment where we did that test and really looked at, do we self-identify with those traits? But the Enneagram, I think, takes it to another level because it's about how you show up with other people. And so even though if you say I'm conscientious or I'm an introvert or extrovert, those are all wonderful things. But how you show up to other people can really make or break your business, right? Your career. And so the Enneagram for me, something I talk about in the book, I believe, and also having some interviews like this is like the good stuff you're really proud of and the not so great stuff, you're like, you have a visceral reaction to, like shame and embarrassment and, oh, let me hide that. And I think the sooner we can have everyday conversations about personality and how we show up in the world, the more we can just embrace that. Because something that shows up to me is these two generations are also told, don't brag about yourself. Don't accept compliments. Oh my gosh, I can't tell you how many millennials I have in the office and I'm praising them for working hard in therapy. And they're like, they literally like recoil from it. Their body goes, oh, thanks. Like, I'm going to move around uncomfortably. And I don't know where that came from. I honestly wish I knew where that origin was, where we were told, don't be cocky, don't be a jerk, don't be full of yourself. Because this generation and the generation below, even though we're accused of being narcissists, it's almost like we have a reaction to, oh, I can't take anything positive in. So long story short, I think if we can embrace our identity, the good, the bad, the ugly, maybe we can be a little bit more receptive to what the world has to offer and the fact that people are trying to encourage us, let alone compliment us on the work we've already done.
The fact that, as you mentioned, we basically, perfectioneurs, we pour our heart, our absolute everything into what we're doing. We're chasing that meaning, we're chasing that impact. And effectively, deep down, we're basically doing it for the compliments. We're basically doing it for the recognition. We want to be recognized. We changed the world. We made it a better place. But once that limelight comes, once people are finally giving you praise, we shy away from it. It's like we discard it and don't even want to acknowledge that we did it.
Yep.
What is the problem with that?
I think for the perfectionist part of this, it's the shoulds. I should be good at this. I've worked my ass off to get here, and so I'm going to continue to put in that hard work. So when we finally get that recognition, as you said, or even just more of that public recognition where it's in front of multiple people versus a one-on-one, the level of discomfort escalates, goes up. Because I think a lot of the people I've worked with, even just giving them praise in their work in therapy, they're like, no, I should just be able to do this. That's what I'm here for. And they just brush it off if they don't have that recoiling reaction in their body where they're literally shaking it off one way or another.
Right.
And I don't know, it's fascinating because I think specifically with this whole you can do anything generation, we're still being told, don't let it go to your head. Don't become a jerk. Don't become that narcissist. And so it's a very fine line to walk to accept that compliment for the work you're doing without worrying that your ego is going to take, an inflated sense of self.
Another part that really stood out to me in your book is when you talk about, that work-life balance. You talk a lot about that story, that anecdote you had with your husband, I believe, and where it came to the point where he said, hey, I only see you like 1 hour a day and I see you 7 days a week, and that's like 7 hours a week. And you were basically at that point just so busy. And that was a massive wake-up call for you. Like, tell us a little bit more about that experience and how it catalyzed change within you, and perhaps even to write this book.
Yeah, I think, something I start the book off with beyond the self-worth and knowing your value is relationships. And for me, getting into that work mode of like just go, 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 you kind of get tunnel vision, right? You kind of focus on the goal. That's all you think of. And you sacrifice so many things to make that happen. Maybe it's your sleep. Maybe you don't eat regularly. Maybe you're eating crap for dinner. And in my case, it was my husband wasn't seeing me. And I think for so many perfectioners and entrepreneurs, when we get our mind set on something, it really does feel like that tunnel vision. So something's got to give. For the Enneagram type 3s out there, we all know that relationships are what give. And so when I learned that back before I did this work myself, I was in a training and they're like, here's what you're like when you're great. Here's what you're like when you're not healthy. My stomach sank. I was like, oh no, this is going to be true. Because what stood out to me is they had an interview with each of these types of people, each of these personality types. And the personality type for 3 was very impressive on paper, had done all these amazing things in their career, had a wonderful resume. And then you ask them about their relationships, and guess what they said? Well, I'm on my 3rd marriage. And I was like, not great news, right? Like this idea of, okay, you're neglecting your relationships, therefore they're not working out. They're suffering, and then maybe they exit. And so for me, when I heard that, I was like, nope, that's not going to be me, right? Like I was like determined, I'm not going to be that person. So when my husband, who's very much an easygoing, patient person, said that to me, oh, so casually, alarm bell, like just hit me in the face. It was just like, oh no, because for him to even say it was a big deal. He's just so easygoing that he's not going to voice those things. So it was festering for months. And I think so many entrepreneurs, that's our risk. Is it too late? Are they going to finally voice it? Are we going to finally see it? Or is it going to just happen without our control? And so I really took that to heart and was like, let me work on myself because I don't want to lose my marriage. Like he's my glue. And I think for so many people, we want to celebrate this hard work with somebody. So if it's not a romantic partner, is it a family member? Is it a close friend who hasn't seen us in months because we're working too hard? So I hope that resonates with the people listening to this interview of like, it's not too late. You can do something. You can get better.
Before we close out here, you mentioned this a few times, and you also talk a lot about this in the book, the role of vulnerability. And surprisingly, we also talk a lot about vulnerability here at Newchip in the Accelerator. We tell companies as you engage in the program, as you meet other entrepreneurs, as you go out and talk to investors, make yourself vulnerable. And we don't just say it because we just want a bunch of vulnerable entrepreneurs in our program. We see value in taking yourself one notch down and saying, I don't know the answers to everything. I need help. I need advice. What is the role of vulnerability in leadership and wellness for entrepreneurs?
I think it leads to this really powerful combination of being inspirational and human. So I'm thinking of kind of those game changers that we all look up to and what they're doing in the world, and they are embracing vulnerability with creativity and change. And so we see them as kind of the perfect package, if you will, which we should probably take away the word perfect, but it's admirable. And so for me, most perfectionists are not going to like vulnerability. In fact, I think I wrote it pretty crassly in the book of like, you're not going to like me for saying, try this, because I had a reaction to being asked to be vulnerable. Especially coming from this generation that feels like they have to have it figured out. They're not going to ask for help. They're just going to flounder or Google or maybe ask their closest friends if they're lucky. And so vulnerability for me has led to some really significant positive changes of people seeing me as more approachable, as more human, as maybe more assertive versus aggressive, as something we talked about earlier. And so I think, the entrepreneurs that are gravitating towards this industry want to be their own boss, want to have that control. And so vulnerability doesn't really come into the equation very often. So I appreciate that Newchip is actually encouraging vulnerability and a place to learn. So we don't have it all figured out.
This is an excellent book. For everybody that's watching this, I can't recommend Perfectioneur enough. And I'm not just saying that because Khara is part of the Accelerator. I'm saying it because this is a good book. It's a very quick read. I read it in one sitting this weekend, and it has a lot of good insight. A lot of good insight for people who are already entrepreneurs, people who are considering being entrepreneurs, or really anybody else that has ambition, that wants to succeed in entrepreneurship, the corporate world, or any other professional field. Well, thank you so much, Khara. Once again, for everybody who's watching Perfectioneur, you can order it on Amazon, get it delivered the next day or two. Highly encourage you that you get it. I love it. I love to read, and this is a great read that's going to be on my shelf all the time. So once again, Khara, thank you so much for taking time to be with us today, and we wish you the best of luck in the career and look forward to your future reads.
Thank you so much.